Welcome to the Counterweight podcast. I am Doug Rogers, Chief Revenue Officer and Managing Partner for Waypoint Healthcare Solutions. And I'm joined weekly by my co-host, James Kanary, founder and owner of the Upper Right Corner. Together, we are focused on speaking to and learning from growth leaders across the healthcare space about their journeys and lessons learned. James and I want to explore how growth leaders manage this tension not only for their teams, but also with their leaders and in many cases, board members and investors. We will discuss with our guests the career journey they have been on, key influences that help them put them into the position they are today. We will talk about successes and challenges, what they learned from these events for themselves and for their teams. Join us each week for a new episode with our guest. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn under the name The Counterweight Podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, and give us feedback as we go along. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Counterweight Podcast. My name is Doug Rogers and I'm joined by my co-host, James Kanary. And we are excited to be here with Bryan Christianson, first-time guest, long-time follower. At least I'd like to believe that. And I think we're going to have a phenomenal conversation over a number of topics that our audience is going to get a lot of value out of. Bryan, it is so great to see you. Why don't we just start? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days, where you've been, and we'll dive into really good content.
Welcome, Bryan.
Yeah, thank you. Great to see you guys. And thrilled to be joining you. As Doug said, I was a season 1 listener, and you guys are deep into season 2 here. So I appreciate the chance to join. And
we have fans,
just to start
James. We've got
one
season
fan.
1 listeners.
One fan.
That's
well. And really, just to start out, I do want to compliment you guys on getting this up and running. I think just somebody who's been part of the listening community and knowing some of the people, or even not knowing some of the people, it's been helpful for me as a sales leader and a sales professional who spent 25 years in healthcare. And I'll kind of get into that, but really appreciate you guys doing this. And I think one of the things that makes it appealing is it's earnest, it's kind of from the heart and authentic. And whether that's in a podcast or whether that's in people that you're working with or working for, I've grown to appreciate that over 25 years. So congratulations to you guys. But yeah, quick background on myself. As I said, 25 years working in healthcare. That's been technology, that's been services. I've had the opportunity to work in environments of really all facets, I would think, in terms of small company. When I say small, about $3 million healthcare technology company, mid-sized company, taking it from helping to take it from 30 million to 100 million and then getting acquired and running it out with a very multi-billion-dollar large company. And then just in the past couple of years working with, I would characterize more as a mid-sized company, 300 million in revenue.
Wait, 3 million, 3 billion, 300 million. You've hit all the threes.
Yes. And what I take from that is a lot of really good experiences, sort of learning different dimensions of selling and sales leadership and even kind of planning for growth and scaling. And sometimes you have the cash flow to do it. Sometimes you don't, all that kind of stuff. So feel like I've been fortunate to work in a variety of different settings, just in terms of helping to lead growth around sales, marketing, business development. And ultimately what that has culminated to is just in the last couple months, getting an opportunity to sort of reflect on that 25 years and thinking about, where do I want to go next? What do I want to do? And so I started a business called RDC Growth Strategies, which is really geared towards helping sales leaders or organizations in a variety of different capacities, go-to-market strategy, thinking about sales in terms of just kind of organizing, planning for growth, putting in processes and systems that may help optimize sales excellence, and even getting into things like coaching and mentorship. And I can even talk a little bit about, I've benefited from that in my past and gained a lot. So thrilled to be with you guys. One of the outputs, I think we'll probably talk about it eventually, is I got into, in working through kind of the framework of RDC, I put together a little bit of a passion project, I would say, but it's called Laws of the Jungle in Sales Leadership. There's 7 laws, and I've been releasing that out into the market purely just to kind of put it out there for the benefit of others, and really been pleased with the response, and hopefully it's helping people out that have gone through or are going through, very similar things that I went through.
So Bryan, I have to ask, the 7 Laws of the Jungle, was that inspired by 80s rock? Were you listening to an 80s rock album and said, man, this is
Nailed
the
it.
thing?
Nailed it. A lot of people have confused me with Axl Rose over the years, so
I see that.
it is
I see
a
that.
tribute to Axl Rose. Welcome to the Jungle, and
You clean up well.
let's
we
rock.
need
Thank
that
you
as our
very much.
lead-in
Thank you
song,
very
by the
much.
way. I don't know if we could pay the royalties
Yeah.
on that, Doug. We'll have to look into
Friday
that.
is usually bandana day for me, but I decided just for the podcast I would clean it up a little bit. So
Hey, we're informal here. We try to keep it real. We're men of the streets, if you will.
I love it.
So Bryan, why don't you, other than giving us your best rendition of an Axl Rose song, take us through a little bit? What are these 7 laws, and how did you kind of develop the concept of these as you went through your career, if you will?
Yeah, full disclosure, this came on the heels of an exit from the prior company. We can get into that later too. But I was offered an opportunity to have some time and really kind of reflect on where I was as a professional, but also what I want to do next.
By the way, not to interrupt, I just I want to have, for those in the audience, everyone on this pod who has been exited from a company, raise your hand. There you go. Look, for our audience members, part of the purpose of this is to talk about hard things. And as you get into your career and you get into executive leadership, more often than not, you're going to find a less than ideal outcome. So we'll talk more about what Bryan's experienced there, but let's not gloss over that this is not an anomaly. It's a normal function. And how you then go prosecute yourself after that is what really makes the difference. So sorry to take you off track, Bryan.
Great point. Yeah, no problem. And I know you're a Peloton rider. I was on the Peloton and just kind of working through, some things. And this started to just kind of emerge as far as like, what are some takeaways that I've had from the prior experience, but even over 25 years. So, I had my phone and I just started kind of making a few notes of, things that started to stand out to me as far as, gosh, what are some of the lessons that I've learned? And obviously in turn, how does that inform me, or how could that help inform some people moving forward? So ultimately spent a lot of time just kind of vetting that out and rounding it out just in terms of some thought and some content and things like that. So I'll be quick on this, and then there's probably a couple that I'll just dive into in terms of the laws. The first law of the jungle is strategy, and this is specific to sales leadership, even executive leadership. I think strategy is like 5% of the work. So, number one, strategy is 5%. Maybe it's 5 to 10, but it's not all of the work. The second is sales fundamentals matter. But
almost like sales is a profession.
Not more than results. As sales leaders, we're signing up to be in a results business. And I think that's got to be the highest priority, even though you look at operational issues and things like that to go fix. The third one, timing matters, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I can circle back on that one, but you're always looking for the rocket ride. You always want to get into the big market, the big sales. And I've been fortunate, and you guys probably been fortunate to be there a couple times, but it doesn't happen that often. And so what do you do in those periods where you're not there? The fourth one, which I think is really important when you think about the profession of selling, is be clear on your value proposition and differentiation. And as you're going out and engaging in the market as a sales professional, I think that's got to be in your job description in terms of your ability to communicate, articulate, obviously inform, persuade, whatever you want to call it. The fifth is seek to align sales goals with company goals. I think there's me included, coming out of the gates, you always think those things are in alignment, and in some cases they are not, and you gotta do your absolute best to get those things aligned. The sixth one, and I believe this, and I'm biased on the people side, but people are your sustainable competitive advantage. And that's probably one of the biggest areas I've changed as a leader over the years, and really getting more coaching oriented and thinking about people and helping work with people, even evaluating people. at the end of the day, I do believe that it's the people that are helping to contribute and help realize success and execute on a plan. And you have to do your best to position them for success. And then the last one, which is a familiar adage, but culture eats strategy for lunch. Okay. And so to me, it really informs you about kind of what is the culture that you want to create. And I think culture has changed, at least for me in 20 years. It's actually changed a lot. And part of it is workforce related, right? We've got just different generations of people kind of moving through, the sales force. And I think they are motivated by different things. They'll actually permit or not permit different things. And so you just have to be attuned to that and really think about, what's the culture you're creating both within a sales org, but how does that kind of tie into the broader part of the organization? So those are the 7. If there's a couple that really kind of stand out to me, and I can get into the background of some of these stories.
I think the thing that really stands out to me is that you came out with the outline while you were on the Peloton. So my goal, James, is that we need to do a recording session where all 3 of us are on the Peloton.
Yeah, that could be really
okay. Then I would definitely have the bandana on, just soaking up the beads.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, it's and this has been a lot of fun putting this together. Again, it gave me some clarity, in terms of things that I think are important, and they're going to inform me around how I'm working with folks moving forward, even what I do next. But also, I just wanted to kind of put this out into the world, and, if it's helping people, great. They'll make a decision there, but I'm kind of a believer of like, hey, put something out there and maybe some good things will come back to you on that. So
yeah. Right
truly
on, man.
the underlying motivator was just, hey, hopefully I can put some of this stuff out there. One of the, if I could, I'll just talk about a couple. The one on the sales fundamentals matter. So where this came from is I had an experience, and it's actually the most recent experience I had of coming into an organization and mid-sized company. You're coming in and you're thinking about, hey, and they had a growth plan, and I'm excited about that, committed to the cause. And then you walk in and just from general things that you would say, hey, these should be part of a sales organization. Do you have a sales process? Do you do one-on-one coaching calls? Do you have pipeline calls? Do you have just general process systems, tools to sell, things like that? I was surprised to find out how little of that was in place. And it's no knock on the company. They've been around for a long time and they've been really successful. But for me as a sales leader, having those things in place is really important, just in terms of kind of running the organization, even giving people an understanding of like how they should be working and moving forward. So I did kind of a preliminary assessment while I was there. And then kind of the output of that was, hey, here's sort of these real, structural things that we need to work on and just kind of get in place, which I would say absolutely were true. One thing that I did not account for was the most important thing are the results, right? So in our case, right, we got a bookings number we're trying to go get every quarter, every year. And, that was obviously on my mind and the team's mind, but I probably got a little more one-sided towards thinking about like, man, I got to get this process put in place. And then how do you get that into CRM, and how do I coach the team on here's what we're putting in place and what that means in terms of how you're moving deals forward and how we're forecasting and all that kind of stuff. That is really important, but I should have dialed back some time on that and all just gotten the sleeves rolled up and dove into some really critical deals that we were working on to help, get those landed in the boat. I think you're as a sales leader, you kind of know what you get into it, and there were definitely good things that were going on there, but if that's really, the genesis of where that came from was, man, as a sales leader, your first and foremost responsibility is you got to get the business and you got to hit those numbers. And, good lesson learned. And for folks that have a real interest in, implementing more of those fundamentals, I just kind of give you guidance of like, they're really important. And I still am a true believer in it, but, just always have that kind of balance and awareness of, at the end of the day, what's your primary accountability in the job to go do?
Yeah. And I don't know, Bryan, did you did you find that, because I'm sure that as you were building out those processes, like you're seeing the big picture and the long-term view. Did you feel like the windows, like the window in which you had to do that was getting smaller and shorter? Was there a sense of like, oh, wow, I really don't have as much time as I thought I had?
Yeah, in some ways. And just as further context, this is a publicly traded company, right? And so
90-day cycles.
There are shareholders to
Mm-hmm.
to support in addition to all the company goals, right? And share price support, EBITDA is important, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think, James, I felt like, I had time, to come in, again, kind of assess, figure out the plan, and help it move forward. But when you go through, in that particular case, we kind of went through a quarter and then we missed, that's where things get real crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then, to that point, James, it is, you can't go back in time, right? And also, like, you can't just hit the microwave and go beep, and all of a sudden we've quickly spun up, deals to backfill and make up for that, right? So time is a relevant factor, absolutely. And in that case, publicly traded company, we're working quarter to quarter, and you just got to be mindful of the results and the timing involved.
I think, Bryan, that speaks to a real tension that us as leaders have, especially when you step into a new role.
Yeah.
And that is hard to navigate. And I wouldn't profess to say that there's a right or wrong answer per se, but on one hand, a lot of the experience that someone like yourself brings to the role is how to create the right infrastructure alignment to deliver on a long-term objective.
Yes.
But conversely, you have very near-term real results that you need the team to achieve. And I imagine, I know I've had this, James, you may have had the same experience. You struggle with, hey, I feel like I could jump in and make this deal happen. But if I do that, I am going to, in some degree, sabotage my individual salesperson and then their relationship with me. And then I'm going to have to repair that after the fact. And I'm always in this firefighting. So where do I find the balance? Where do I step in versus lean back, if you will?
Yeah.
And get that exactly right so that you achieve the results, but you've got enough of the infrastructure and trust that's building to really grow those results over time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's part of, in that kind of initial time frame, I was absolutely going, hey, I'm believing in the people and I want to help and coach them, to see it to success. And then you get to the end of that and you go, gosh, we missed on that deal. Ouch. Yeah. And that was a lesson learned, certainly for that person, but also for me. And I talk about this in sort of the law. I think you got to pick your spots, and at least as a sales leader. Now, this is all dependent on company size, all that kind of stuff, but you got to pick your spots. And if there are deals that I would characterize as meaningful or highly strategic, they could be, hey, these are big dollar deals. These are highly complex things. These have strategic importance just in terms of getting in the door with a really meaningful client or opening up a particular piece of business or, whatever it might be, as much as you want to let the team feel empowered and give them free rein or whatever, it just, as a leader, you're the one that's accountable. Right. And so, you can't be involved in every deal, but I think you got to step in. And as far as working with the team, I think you just do your best to communicate and go, hey, here's what's driving it. And I did have, later on had conversations with people who go, just understand this isn't about you. Okay. So I know it may feel uncomfortable, maybe unnecessary. You don't like, myself or some of the other executives getting involved in this stuff, but these are important things for the business overall. And they do warrant additional help. And we're all going to win together. And so, try to best understand that. And then this is how we're going to approach it. And let's work together to get to the best outcome. And it doesn't feel great because when, the clock strikes zero at the end of the quarter.
Yeah. You can't unwind that clock.
Be right.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to one of our prior guests, Nick Helfrich. He used the phrase when we were talking about a very similar concept that I'm okay if you win alone, but you better not lose alone. Meaning that if you say, hey, as an individual salesperson, I've got this deal and you win it, that's great. But if you go and lose it and you didn't have me as your executive, or we didn't bring in the chief marketing officer, we didn't bring in the product leader, et cetera, it's actually going to be worse for you than if you would have brought us all in and we still would have lost the deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right.
Yeah. And I think it's all the way in which how you lead, right? It doesn't mean like if you're providing additional support, which is really what it is, right? It doesn't have to be micromanagement. It can feel like that. So that's where I think it's how we go about doing it. Because I've been on the other side of that as a rep. I remember like early in my career, I had managers who were very supportive, but they also challenged, pushed, right? They had the good balance of support challenge. And then there were some who just kind of wanted to come in and take over, and that didn't feel great. Yeah. So I think there's a way to strike that right balance, right rhythm with that individual rep, provide the support that's needed, give a sense of gravitas to that situation, and not smother them. So hopefully there's a right balance that you can strike there.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other law I was going to highlight, which I alluded to a little bit earlier, but like seek to align sales goals with company goals. I want to bring this up because I've had an opportunity to talk with a number of what I would characterize as like peers and colleagues, that are in sales leadership and things like this. You're coming in, you're being asked to grow the top line, and that's usually how I think about sales, right? And you are, thinking about how to go out and accomplish that. In a lot of cases, numbers are probably coming tops down, and you've got, energy and enthusiasm, and you're getting the troops to go out there and do it. I think it's really important to have awareness of, aside from that, what are also the goals of the organization. And why I bring this up is I think the market has changed quite a bit. And I'll just call it in the last probably 5 to 10 years, in terms of there's such an increased emphasis on EBITDA. And this, in my case, it's, a couple times it's been in a publicly traded environment. Some of the colleagues that I'm talking to that have been or are currently in environments where they're PE owned, they're very EBITDA focused. And that's not bad. That's just kind of the ways the business are working. I think you just have to have an understanding of how do those two things fit together. And I think it's rare at times that you go, hey, we're going to see double-digit growth on the top line, and we're going to see exponential improvement on the bottom line. It definitely can happen, so I'm not ruling that out. But as I've kind of gone through, and even others that are going through it now, it's a difficult thing to pull off. And at the end of the day, the EBITDA tends to seem to win out a little bit more, just in terms of prioritization. And so my guidance on that is, again, I love thinking about growth, right? And that's what kind of gets me energized. And I think that's ultimately for salespeople, right? You're being asked to go do that new business, add-on business, whatever it is. And we're incented to go do that too, right? So you've got to go do that. But to the best of your ability, I think one is sort of the growth numbers or growth targets are being laid out, like really try to insert yourself into some of those conversations with, if it's the CFO or, whoever it is, just to kind of vet that out. And it's not coming from a place of like, hey, we want to sandbag this thing so we can go out and, have a huge result and everybody gets to go down to the Bahamas for a week or whatever. It's actually just to go, let's try to be as thoughtful and clear about how we want to set this. And oh, by the way, help me understand where things are on the EBITDA line. And because what I've experienced is you go, hey, here's the growth target, and I'm just going to make up a number here. It's 20%. We're trying to grow this thing 20% next year. Right. We are also trying to increase this EBITDA line. And so because the EBITDA is important, we are not making additional investment in marketing. We're not making additional investment in headcount. And we may not make any additional investment in the product portfolio to have an additional widget to sell or something like that, which are all, again, they're really reasonable business decisions based on what you're trying to accomplish. But it does start to inform you around, okay, how do we go out and set goals to try to create the growth and achieve it? And also what really becomes important, to kind of get there. And you're signing up for it.
Right.
One way or the other.
Being part of that dialogue is helpful. And maybe you can kind of fine tune it. And I think I certainly encourage people like bring math to the table, right? So you can kind of math out assumptions around, okay, what do we think about the market? Or even how have we performed historically in terms of here's what we're generating in new pipeline. Here's, our average conversion rate just in terms of closing the deals. Here's the sales cycle, all that kind of stuff. I don't have, the foolproof recipe to go do it, but I definitely encourage people to kind of get into that. And then the other piece of sort of aligning with the sales goals and the kind of the company goals is I've, for the most part, tended to be in organizations where it's like, hey, we're organically going out to do this, right? So it's you and the crew, and we just need to crank it up and do more sales, which is, that's a path to go down. I would encourage folks to say, hey, what are alternatives to that? If you're truly trying to get some of this top line growth and it seems like, resources or whatever may be a little bit limited, are there other paths to go down? Can you look at reselling relationships? Can you look at joint venture? Can you look at working with channel, whatever it is, and don't, and I'm guilty of this, you get a little bit tunnel vision and it's like, all right, me and the team, we're going out to knock on as many doors as possible, and we're just going to go door to door this thing, and
right,
and you
Let's
can do
throw
that.
More bodies at it, right?
Yeah, correct. That's the other thing I would encourage people to think about is it's you're trying to help the company with their goals, but also like you are going to sign up for some of these sales goals. So be part of the dialogue. Try your best, to be involved and get reasonable decisions, and also like just don't get boxed into, okay, it's just me and the team and we got to go out and get it. There are other avenues to explore. They do take, time and stuff like that, but there's not just one way to skin that cat. So anyway, that's my quick plug on the company goals and the sales goals piece of it to offer to people just to sort of think through and chew through as they're going through their year or they're planning for the next year.
I think that's huge, Bryan. I mean, I think for so much of my career, I just assumed that sales goals were aligned with company goals. Why wouldn't they be?
Yeah.
Right. And as I've had a chance to experience when I've seen it done well, I've seen it not done well, I've executed, I've had times when I haven't executed. There's a lot of factors to that, right? I mean, you could have complete alignment and still, not be able to deliver on the number. I mean, there's just lots of things going on there with market dynamics and personnel and all those kinds of things. I think just being intellectually curious and saying, well, what's the company actually really after here? Is it EBITDA? Is that like the thing that's the most important to the company? And if so, how do these sales numbers, this goal, how can I best contribute to that and be an active participant in it and try to influence that versus sort of like, oh yeah, okay, we're good, or man, this is too high, too low, like get involved and try to influence that as much as we can and to understand the bigger picture is what I'm hearing. So,
and even I would use one example of like margin. Okay. So they're building a model based on a assumption of like, here's what we're trying to get in margin. You got to be clear on that, but ultimately you're asking your people to go out there and work to kind of preserve that margin. And it's one thing to say like, hey guys, here's the guardrails and we got to stick to it. Let's go for it. It's another thing to go, here are the guardrails. Let me explain a little bit why. Okay. It's just going to give the sales folks, I think, hopefully a better understanding of we're trying to go out and sell this stuff, but we are trying to align with the company goals of 18% or whatever it is to just make them feel, one, more informed, but two, hopefully aligned to, hey, we're trying to drive top line, but also it fits into a bigger picture, which is a company goal of margin, preservation or growth or things.
Right. And if we don't communicate that, by the way, just like with anything, in the absence of communication,
Yes.
People will draw their own conclusions. They'll start to create a narrative about,
yes.
The company doesn't want me to succeed, or, I guess we're not, about growth anymore. Just those kind of stupid narratives that creep in. I mean, even ourselves, I think we have to be careful as to what assumptions we make. And so I think the more we communicate as to the why, I mean, people are smart. They understand, like if you give them a reasonable explanation, hey, like, this is why we're doing this, more often than not, they can understand it. They can run with it. It's like, okay, yeah, it might not be my favorite thing, but at least I understand why we're doing it.
Talk a little bit, as you've gone through your journey, you were at a smaller startup called Mobile Aspects, where you're the VP of Business Development and Marketing. You were at B.E. Smith. I think that was one of the ones where it's 30-ish million and grew to hundreds of millions of dollars. You were an SVP of client engagement. You then went to AMN, where you were an SVP of client management. And then you went to TrueBridge, where you were head of sales.
Yeah.
As you were going on this journey, and some of this distilled down into your 7 laws, if you will, when you stepped into those roles, what are some of the things that you did to assess the lay of the land and try to answer some of the questions that you just talked about?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think you try to get as much information as you can, just as you're doing your own research or interviewing and stuff like that. But I'm sure you guys can relate to, it's like, you just don't know what you don't know. Right. And so I've kind of landed on a little bit of a framework. Part of it is for me, but I think ultimately it's for the organization and the team to just sort of lay out, like, hey, what do we need to go to work on, and what's a little bit of a plan. So the framework is what I call the 3 Ps. Okay, so first P stands for people.
We're going to put it up in the picture.
Okay.
I'm not just pointing to space.
We're going to have the
second
Street.
P. The second P stands for process. And then the last P stands for performance.
So people, process, performance.
Correct. Yeah. And let me just real quickly, I'll kind of run through those, and then we can dive into something that you like. But on the people side, think of that as really understanding a few things. I think one is, what do you have in terms of talent and competencies? Okay. The second is just what is in place just in terms of sort of communication systems, things like how are you working with people? How are you coaching both as individuals or groups, stuff like that. And then the last one is kind of trying to get a handle on, like, what are the cultural attributes of the sales team and sort of the sales organization. So that's kind of the people standpoint. The process piece of it is you're coming in and just try to understand, like, what does that sales process look like? I've been in situations where it's a long sales cycle, technology sale, highly complex, things like that. I've been in environments where it's a more shorter sales cycle, a little more transactional selling. But I think it's really important just to start to get a handle on, like, hey, what does that process look like from, start to finish? In turn, then that kind of moves into, you're automating some of that, most likely through a CRM or things like that. How does the process come together into automation, into ultimately how are we using those systems to support selling and support forecasting and deal management and stuff like that? So that's sort of the process piece of it. And then the third on performance is really getting a good handle on how are goals established, and frankly, how have we been performing to goal. Okay, so if we don't have a good understanding of what the goals are, and ultimately, like, how we're tracking on those goals, and even how they're being shared within the organization or within team members, you got to start figuring that out fairly quickly. How do we do things like forecasting and deal management? So you have a pretty good handle of where things are, what things are looking like. I guess most of my situations have come in where it's like you're looking at it and you go, wow, this is a $2 billion pipeline. And then you get in there and it's like a garden, right? You're just weeding out. It's not helpful to the business to have that frankly. It's not helpful as a sales leader, but I think you got to really spend a little bit of time kind of sculling through that to figure out, like, what do we have in our hands in terms of just evaluating performance or where we are. And then the last one is looking at incentive structure and alignment. So having a pretty good handle on, how are the goals set, but in turn, what are we incentivizing as far as behavior and ultimately outcomes as far as selling? And is it commission stuff? Is it goal-based selling? All that kind of stuff. So those are sort of my three pillars of, coming in and doing an assessment. And that can be done within probably a 4 to 6 week period. But I think it's just important for me as a leader to really start to get a handle on that. And then what the output of that is or can be is, one, I think you're sharing that with, people on the executive team, maybe potentially the board, that just goes, all right, here's what my observations are, but ultimately here's what my recommendations are in terms of putting together a plan. And that plan could be, this house is fire and we need to do A, B, C in the next 30 days. Or, fortunately, I haven't been in house on fire situations, but you go, hey, here's what we're going to focus on in this quarter or over the next series of quarters to get going in a certain direction. So that's kind of my framework on the 3 Ps. And I'm happy to dive into anything specifically that you want to learn a little more about.
Well, I would just encourage our audience. So one, if you want to better understand how you can put a framework like that into practice, drop Bryan a DM. I know he would be happy to have a conversation. And Bryan, as you were describing this, I suspect most people would listen to that and go, hey, that makes sense. That's intuitive. Those are the things that you should be doing. What I would encourage our audience members to think about and take from your comments is articulating that structure is important, both when you're going through the interview process and then when you're stepping into the leadership role, because sometimes I think we miss the fact that the CEO, board members, the people who are bringing us on to be growth leaders, they are looking to us to have a book of experience that is going to assess the lay of the land, put in plans to mitigate or improve, and then go drive success. And they are made more confident in our ability to do that when we can articulate a roadmap for how we're going to actually accomplish those goals and then share that back with them. So, just would encourage our audience members, maybe come up with your own 3 Ps, but have a playbook, because that is going to serve you well as you go through these conversations.
Yeah, and that, that's something I would even share with the team coming in, right? Hey, day one or whatever it is, hey, we're excited. We're looking forward to, working with everybody, just to give you an understanding of here's what I'm going to be working on over the next, handful of weeks. And it's not with the guys of, figuring out, hey, who's staying or who's going or whatever. No, this is actually, the intent of this is to go through kind of a thoughtful exercise to help us get a better understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go as a sales team, how we're trying to accomplish it. And then ultimately it's going to inform the executive team, the board, whoever, about where we're going to be spending time and effort. I just, I'm a believer that people more often than not, right, they want to go do the work. They just want to have an idea of like, hey, where are we going with this thing and what are we trying to accomplish? Right. And so you got to give them a sense of like, hey, here's where we're going, what we're trying to accomplish, even why we're trying to accomplish it, so that they just have, they can work with a little bit of ease of, okay, I got kind of an idea what it's about. Now I'm going to go back into my territory, or I'm going to go work with, my 50 accounts or whatever it is to help kind of contribute to that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, Bryan, I can see from the diploma behind you.
Yes.
Unless the University of Iowa diploma, did that just come with the frame, or was that?
Well, for those esteemed graduates, we call it the Harvard of the High Plains, but it is the University of Iowa. Yeah. Graduate.
Yeah,
degree.
No, that's great. A fellow Big Ten guy. I'm a Michigan Wolverine. I don't have any of my national championship banner is too large for me to pull into the frame here. But I know
tribulations.
You're a hardworking guy because you got that Iowa background, right?
Yeah. Most important game is the last one of the year, us in Nebraska. It's usually the battle for Big Ten mediocrity.
There
and
you
go. We come out on the top end of that thing all the time.
Good stuff. But I know you're all about hard work and lessons learned and applying those. What I've found is I don't know that it's a lack of hard work that can do someone in, but what would your advice be Bryan, to a sales leader who's maybe taken on a new role or been promoted, or maybe some brand new to a company that's trying to come in and get a lay of the land? Because I think the reason they got there is probably because they're a hard worker, right? There's probably something there. So I don't know that it's ever a lack of hard work, but just how would you, what advice would you give to them so that not only do they work hard, but they work smart? And how, in sort of that Iowa spirit of both hard work, smart work, that kind of thing, what advice would you give to that sales leader kind of up and coming as they take on a new role, jump into a new company?
Yeah. So first, I shared this with Doug in maybe a conversation we had a few weeks ago, but one of the things that I think about is I had the good fortune of having some executive coaching. This goes back probably 10 years ago. It was actually when I really, really needed it. So for background, I was at B.E. Smith for 5 years. And then it was I got an invite for an 8 a.m. meeting on Monday morning. I got it on like Sunday night. Okay. So invite from my boss at the time, great guy, mentor to me, named Mike something. And you get that 8 a.m. invite, the night before. And usually, you're like, uh-oh, what's up? I think I'm in good standing. So, what's going to go on here? And so I walked in and, sat down at 8 a.m. and said, hey, what's going on? And, he said, well, what would you think about the idea of taking over as head of sales? Okay. Yeah. I think that's something that I'd be interested in doing. He said, great, because we're going to announce that on Wednesday.
Glad you said yes.
And
that would have made the press release really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it was good news for Mike. He was getting promoted and taking on additional stuff. And then it was good news for me, but it was one of those situations where you go, hey, I didn't have a lot of time to sort of prepare for it. I think if you're a motivated professional, hey, you aspire to continue to do more, to take on more responsibility, whatever. So, it was a good deal for me, but it was a fairly quick time frame to say, hey, we're going to give you this role. And now here it is, go to work. And so for the first 6 months of that, and there were also unique dynamics of, hey, I've got, a bunch of peers that are now going to call me boss. And I can get into that at a later time. But, what made me think about that as the Iowa thing or kind of Midwest values, right? You're just like, hey, I just need to work hard and, all good things will come of that, which is true. And I think there's no substitute for hard work. But a really good lesson for me learned in that is me putting in 60, 70 hour weeks to try to make the progress and get things done there's like diminishing returns, right? You cannot do it all. The other thing is it was actually very tough on my, I would say, mental and physical well-being, and even kind of like my family life kind of thing. And so for folks that are stepping in, I would say, first of all, just be mindful of, you can absolutely contribute, but it doesn't all come from just like hard work and just putting in endless hours to go do it. And that's where I got introduced to this executive coach. One of the most helpful things that he helped me with early on was we went through this exercise, and again, anybody can send me a message on LinkedIn. I can talk to you about it, go through it, but it's simply put, it's called a resource management exercise. And there's really a couple important criteria or things that you're going to do in going through that. The first is you get really clear on, in this role and what your job is, what are your primary accountabilities? And I think for most sales leaders, it probably boils down to 3 things, maybe 4. Okay. One is you got to hit your numbers, and that's just what you're signing up for. So be very clear on that. The second is, depending on what you're at, but the second is usually like, hey, keep your clients happy. Okay. You are engaging with those clients on a day-to-day basis, and you can play a big part in making sure that clients feel, happy about doing business with you and saying good things. The third is, in my case, you are helping to coach and mentor and develop people. And so you got to have time. And I think that's a high priority of, you're there to help support and develop those people. And then for me, the last one is usually like, what are you doing from a culture standpoint, right? Are you contributing for a culture to help? So that's just generally sort of the 4 that come out. And I actually go through this exercise probably every 6 to 9 months just to sort of help me get clear and reset. So you get clear on your accountabilities. And then the next is, how are you spending time through your week? All right. And general categorization of it, right? It could be like, I'm on management calls. I'm on forecasting call. I'm on client calls. I'm doing coaching. I'm doing email or stuff, whatever it is. You'll probably come up with a list of like 10, 12, 15 things. And now go through an exercise and figure out, of those 12, 15 activities, how do they line up to meeting those primary accountabilities? And that helped me to go, oh, okay, as much as I'm going to make one up, right? As much as I want to be on the holiday party planning call, that is not going to supersede getting on a call with a client or spending time one-on-one coaching one of my people or whatever. But so then you take that and you go, okay, well, now we're going to rank these basically 1 through 15.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3, those will get your most time. And then intentionally start to block out time in your calendar to just go, boom, I've got time already set aside where I can work on this stuff. And that's where I should be spending most of my time. And, as you're working down the list, some of the stuff you may block time out for, some you don't. But that, to me, was really important of just, 1, getting clear on what are your accountabilities, 2, starting to set yourself up from a time perspective, because time is your most important resource for anybody, but as a leader, make sure you're taking control of your time and getting it allocated into the right places. And you get out of like react mode, you get into proactive mode. The other benefit of that is you're blocking out time so that, hey, if people want to grab time from you, there's still slots available. Sure. But it's not coming at the expense of how you want to prioritize time, how you want to organize yourself to do the work that should be most important to helping get accomplished. That's probably one of the biggest things that I would give, somebody new into that role, or somebody that, has been doing it a while and is just trying to figure out, like, how do I get more effective? How do I get better? Is I would recommend kind of going through that kind of an exercise and just taking more control over what you're doing and where you're working, rather than just working reactive mode. Because it's a tough place to be.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you're in reactive mode, it's never enough. You're like, exactly. Right. So you're always going to be reacting along the line. Get control of this thing and call your own place.
So Bryan, we're going to bring this to a close here in a second, but I want to spend one more moment on both the guidance that you just gave and this executive coaching piece. And I want to give a shout out to our other guest in season 1. I would go so far, James, as to say 1 out of 2 talked about a relationship that they had with an executive coach. And, it struck me, I know we talked about this in some of the episodes in last season. I was highly skeptical of the benefit of having that type of relationship until I was offered that chance in my prior role. I've done some coaching with you that has been super positive and beneficial. And I would encourage our audience, you should think of this as a secret unlock strategy for your career. Go find a coach, DM Bryan, James, myself. We can give some recommendations. But there is a lot of value there that sometimes you may not appreciate or you may not know about until you talk to someone else who's used or gone through that experience.
Yeah, well put. And I should give the gentleman I work with and still communicate today with, a good friend, is named Cliff Sutton. But there's a lot of coaches out there that I think can be helpful, either at a point in time or over an extended period of time, just to help you kind of work through problem solving.
That was my consistent experience with James as a coach. There's a lot of call out. What are you doing?
Hey,
You're dumb. Come on, man. Be better.
Minimal yelling.
That's right.
The clipboard and the whistle maybe were a little too much.
Well, I'm better for it. So Bryan, look, we've covered a lot of really good ground. There's still more that we could talk about, which I think that's the nature of these conversations. But we're going to bring this to a close. and James and I have not talked about this, so this is very much off the cuff. We had in season 1, we had a quote unquote surprise question, probably less surprising as the season went on.
Okay.
I'm not gonna say, James, you may have something you want to throw a wild card here, so I think we can equally do one, but I want to just throw one out there, and this is directionally in line with the topic, our audience, digital health. Bryan, give us a hot take for 2025 in digital health. What's the thing that you're like, man, this is gonna whack somebody upside the head and make them go, I did not see this coming? Agnosticate, if you will.
Wow. I don't do a lot of hot takes. I'm usually a little bit measured in, how I think of things, how I share things. If I could share one thing, just in general, I think, everybody's sort of got to be prepared for, at least I'll say the first half of the year, is just going to be disruptive. And that's in a lot of different ways. I think a lot of it is looking at just sort of the market and figuring out like, where are things going, and, administration changes that impact that. And there's a few other things, right? So I think one observation from my end is like, there's going to be a little bit of disruption and sort of settling. And, because of that, like, don't everybody freak out. It's just, that is where we are. And eventually I think it'll settle out. And I work mostly on the provider side of my career. So it's like, hey, providers will, they're going to figure out a way to move forward. And what's most important, man, what is going to be really interesting in the market? I'll tell you what I'm most interested in seeing evolve. How's that sound? And I think it's got the potential to do it. I do think we have a real crisis in the healthcare industry in terms of like providers. I'm going to talk more about physicians, could be extenders, but it could be other caregivers. But I really hope that, we've had all this cool stuff going on where like AI and machine learning and large language models and things like that. I am really hoping that stuff picks up some speed, matures, and it is going to make a meaningful impact in helping providers get some time back in their lives.
Yeah.
It is, I have a near and dear friend who lives a couple blocks away, who's a trauma surgeon, and he's a wonderful human being, and he's a father and all this kind of stuff. But he spends a lot of time it's documentation related stuff. It's following, that's the thing that I'm probably keeping my eye on, is just how does the market evolve with some of those more advanced technologies that the promise has felt like it's been there for so long. Mm-hmm. And it just hasn't materialized. And so this is a hot take like, hey, AI, but I think to me, the real interesting thing in this year is like, how does it really start to create meaningful impact to automate administrative times that's being sucked up by providers? Or even I get into like, I think it has some real potential in like coding, which is it's just a dark, in some cases, like it's 2025. We're in a modern society. We got these great tools and automation. And so that's probably, to me, what I'm most excited about, is just seeing like, hey, how does this develop and evolve to truly create a meaningful impact into delivery?
I think the rally cry there is, let doctors be doctors, let nurses be nurses, and let technology go do all the stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Bryan, I think that was, I love that perspective. Well, it's certainly a lot of things to be nervous about, to be excited about in terms of where 2025 is going to go. Look, man, we had a great conversation. I love the 7 laws of the jungle. Shout out to you for putting that down on paper. Yeah. Shout out, even more impressive that you're able to write while you're writing. That's a really impressive multitask there. So kudos to that. There you go.
2 thumbs, man.
How can people find you? What's the best way if they want to reach out and talk to you more? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way to reach me is LinkedIn. Really, I'm out there. You can find my name. Feel free to send me a connection, send me a message. I'm happy to, no items too big or too small. Like, I'm happy to just help people and connect. And then if I could, I just want to share one sort of closing comment, which is people have gone through a lot of stuff professionally, ups and downs, all that kind of stuff. I found myself a few years ago in a place where I was really struggling to find just sort of energy and motivation and fulfillment and stuff like that. And it was primarily geared on the work side, but I was just struggling. And I came across this interview with, he's a well-known guy who's authored some books and stuff like that. Marshall Goldsmith is his name. He's management guru, executive coach kind of thing. And to make something long, very short, he shared something in that had a real profound impact on me. And it was, he had come across some folks who did a study that talked to folks that were kind of late stages in their life. And they essentially said, like, hey, at 95 years old, what would you tell yourself if you were 40, 45, things like that? And there were three things that really came out of that I took. Timing is everything, but I took to heart, and it's been meaningful for me moving forward. I would share it with others. The first is be happy now. So it's very easy, just in lieu of what I was sharing, like what's going to go on in the market, all that stuff. It's easy to get spun up on the future. It's easy to look back on the past. Just try to think about like where you are, where your feet are planted, and try to be happy in the moment. And that is professional, that's personal, all that kind of stuff. So one, be happy now. Your friends and family are the most important. So when we get through the journey here professionally or whatever, you're getting to the core, those are the people that are around you. Don't take that for granted. And I know we can always get busy zigzagging around, getting on planes, closing deals or whatever. But I took that to heart in terms of really thinking about friends and family. And then the last thing is, if you have a dream, go for it. And so there's a ton of really good ideas, whether it's in this KC community of people that go, hey, I got a great idea and I want to hang it out there, or across the country. And so, this is a little bit of the laws of the jungle thing, whatever. I just, hey, this is an inspiration and I'm just going to go do it. I don't know where it's going to lead to, but I think if you go for something, you won't regret it, and good things will follow. So thank you for indulging me there. I hope you kind of take that.
Good words. Appreciate you being on the pod, Bryan. Thank you very much.
You bet, guys.
All right. It was
my pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are excited to bring new episodes out each week. We are incredibly grateful to our guests and our listeners. Let us know what you think by commenting on the episodes. We are proudly sponsored by the Upper Right Corner, which provides advice on strategic growth, including growth assessments and strategy, go-to-network planning, sales leadership and team coaching, and fractional leadership roles. For more, visit theupperrightcorner.com. Waypoint Healthcare Solutions is also proud to sponsor the Counterweight podcast. Waypoint HCS is a focused consulting organization helping health systems, providers, and organizations to develop and implement patient engagement strategies. Waypoint HCS provides strategic consulting and patient engagement technology guidance and selection. Waypoint also helps support implementation and ongoing program management. For more, visit Waypoint HCS's LinkedIn page or waypointhcs.com. Thank you to our guests and our listeners. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, and follow, and we look forward to joining you again next Wednesday for another episode of The Counterweight.